physical evidence based of like this thing actually exists. Okay, I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, welcome back. This is Hughdoo Archaeology. We're deep diving into ancient Egypt and the mysteries found there. No, I'm just kidding. I'm super into this stuff. I wanted to share with you guys. Okay, so this video is about, it's titled The Unknown Ancient Site Said to be Greater Than the Pyramids, Confirmed with Satellite Scans. No, we're not flat earthers. God damn it. This is about the ancient Egyptian labyrinth that was part of mythology. It's what the ancient Greece labyrinth was based on. Alien lasers? Maybe alien lasers. Maybe alien lasers. For sure. Yep, yeah, the labyrinth in ancient Greece with the Minotaur myth. This is what that labyrinth was based on. And this actually exists. So this isn't like we're not guessing at how they made it. Well, I mean, we are a little bit, but not like the bases. Much much less speculation about this than there are about the bases.
Ground penetrating radar.
Actually.
VLF. Just so many different techniques. The Geoscan and Merlin Burrows satellite technologies, I mean, they're vastly different techniques. They seem to be aligned. They're telling you the same things. So they found something. Like, there's something down there. What is down there seems to be also quite a mystery. The central object is hard to classify. It appears metallic, not stone or wood. A freestanding 40-meter long metallic tic-tac shaped object.
Aliens.
Approximately, what, 50, 60 meters below the ground in a huge big open corridor or an atrium. Come on. Like, this is a remarkable claim.
It's where the Lieutenant Fravor tic-tac UFO came from. Probably. Right? That sounds real, right?
Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I hope everyone is doing well. Today, I want to share a story with you. A story about what I think is one of the most important ancient sites in the world. Something that legitimately could represent the discovery of the...
Man, you know what? I would love to travel to Egypt and see all this in person someday. Just to see it in person. The only trouble with that is that, like, I'm the kind of person that would go there to see this, and like maybe after 10 minutes to half an hour of being there, I'm like, okay, I get it, I understand, I'm ready to go home now. It would be a complete waste of a trip. Oh my god, I wish I could revel in the grandeur of stuff for longer than I'm actually able to. Apparently there's trash everywhere. Yeah, there is. You'll see it in this video. There's like plastic and just garbage all over the place.
Millennium. Something that, at least in my opinion, represents the biggest and best opportunity for real archaeology and offers a chance to truly unravel the past and reveal details and the truth of our own far distant history. Yet, despite this tantalizing opportunity, the site goes mostly unacknowledged, or even worse, seems to have been subjected to a deliberate cover-up, with researchers being threatened and others actually being jailed for their involvement with this place.
That's true, that's documented.
However, as you'll see, if you stick with me in this video, the truth is beginning to be told, and with the advent of new technologies being developed in recent years, including some that have made quite a stir in just relatively recent months, new discoveries have been made surrounding this site that will, I assure you, blow your mind with their claims and implications. So, strap in, grab a beverage, and let me tell you about one of the greatest historical stories never told.
Chat, he said strap in, not strap on.
Before we get started, a quick bit of context. This is a version of the presentation that I shared for the first time at the Cosmic Summit in June 2025. And it's something that I've been wanting to talk about at a venue like that for some years now. I chose
All right,
this year.
time to get
because,
in, relax,
well,
and
as you'll
watch
see,
this.
topic is closely related to the main theme of the summit, and indeed
Bob.
that of the
What are you
whole
doing?
ancient Egyptian news cycle that's been blowing up all the way into mainstream media recently. The space-based synthetic aperture radar and Doppler tomography, deep Earth
Those are the scans from underneath the pyramid, the ones with like the multiple kilometer shafts underneath the pyramids.
scans, particularly of the middle pyramid at Giza.
Hi, Bob.
I happened to be in Egypt when that news broke, and I had a lot of people reaching out to me about it. In fact, I was even invited to that Piers Morgan kerfuffle with all the other YouTubers and good old Flint Dibble, which was an opportunity that I
shafts.
declined. I really didn't feel like I had a lot to offer on the topic
Big,
at the time,
thick,
and
long
well,
ones.
I just don't like mainstream media, and I generally want nothing to do with it or with its pundits. While I'm certainly less skeptical now than I originally was on this new satellite-based
Deep
tech,
shafts.
hey, I definitely want to believe. I'm certainly no expert on the technical details, and I still think it's a bit of a black box, but it's definitely promising. Here's something that few people interested in this technology really know about, that the Italian scientists with their synthetic aperture radar and Doppler approach are certainly not the only ones using space-based tech to scan beneath the ground. And we'll explore some of the other somewhat similar efforts in this video. I do think that the claims from Biondi and May, and particularly all of the media attention that they've received, are opening up some incredible opportunities and possibilities, but as you'll see, I think we're skipping over some of the true potential for groundbreaking exploration and discovery in the field, as it were. It'll all make sense once we get into it. Trust me, the Italian scientists behind the Khafre scan work were at the Cosmic Summit when I was there, and they were deservingly billed as the headliners. But as I learned after the event, apparently my little related topic, the presentation that we're about to get into, won the award for the most mind-blowing presentation at the summit, as voted by its attendees.
So you got to remember the scans of the ground underneath the pyramid that made headlines last month or the month before, whatever. the project, there were 3 project leaders for that team. One of them was the leading guy that knew how to use the technology. The other 2 are largely considered pseudo-archaeologists. Like they're less discover evidence and create a theory, more have a theory and try to apply evidence to support that. So big problems with those scans because they're inferring a conclusion that the scans might not really show.
So thank you to everyone for that. I'm glad that the people there
versus what they're going to talk about here with the Labyrinth. They're very much showing scanning evidence that supports written documentation from early archaeologists that hypothesize and found evidence that the Labyrinth exists. So it's not really a question whether the Labyrinth exists or not. It's it really does. They just can't get down to it, which for reasons you'll see. So all they have to go on are the scans, and the scans are pretty detailed, and they support the written documentation from like the early 1900s.
Good catching it live. Personally, I've never felt much more than dread when it comes to public speaking at those events, but hey, I think it actually went pretty well. When I got home, I really wanted to share this topic with everybody else out there who might be interested in it, and I wanted to do so in a medium that I'm a bit more comfortable in, which happens to be here on YouTube or Spotify or Rumble or wherever it is that you're watching this. Before we get started, a quick update on the channel and some upcoming stuff. If you want to skip ahead,
Right,
use the
we'll
chapters.
skip
shown
all
down
the-
below.
over
All
this.
set off. A bunch of that you can and other. I don't
Yeah, you
really
can
do
go buy
video
his merch if you
sponsorship
want.
model. So the intro, this is a topic that I've wanted to get into for several years now, and I chose this year at the Cosmic Summit to present and talk about this because I think it is closely related to what has been the major theme of certainly the Cosmic Summit and pretty much of the news cycle surrounding, the ancient world, particularly ancient Egypt, and that is the Khafre scan project. So the Italian scientists who came out with their claims and their method of using synthetic aperture radar from satellites combined with Doppler tomography and seismic data to peer below the Earth at the Giza Plateau and make these extraordinary claims that there are all of these massive structures and objects deep beneath the ground, these huge, hundreds of meters of shafts and 80-meter wide cubes and all of these things being connected by tunnels and other subterranean infrastructure. This topic that I'm going to get into is quite closely related to that, but that's by no means the only use of new technology that's happened in 2025 or indeed in the last several years. There's been a lot of projects that I think are showing that new technology is helping us to uncover hidden details and learn more about these structures and artifacts that come to us throughout history. Another great example of this is, of course, the Scan Pyramids project, which has been running for, I think, 10 years or more now at this point. They were using muon detection or cosmic ray detection techniques to discover and show that there are, in fact, hidden voids within structures like the Great Pyramid. This has been an experiment that's been ongoing for many years. In fact, a bunch of the times pretty much over the last 5 or 6 years that I've been going into the Great Pyramid on a fairly regular basis, I've always found a lot of their equipment that's being set up and used as part of this experiment inside the pyramid. Down in the subterranean chamber, you'll find server racks full of gear. The Queen's chamber at times has been just packed full of, workshop equipment as well as server racks and other infrastructure. And then there's been all these detection panels that have been laid up and down the Grand Gallery. I'm happy to say that at the moment, at least the last time I was in there, all of this equipment has since gone because they've spent the time, they've had the several years of collecting their data, but the data is showing that there are in fact hidden passages and chambers within the Great Pyramid that we really never knew about. And in fact, that's one of the ways that we know that this technology, it really does work, because they not only did they find the big void, the big space that's near the Grand Gallery, about the same size of it, but they also found a smaller chamber that was right behind the chevrons, these chevron-shaped blocks that sit above the main entrance, the descending passageway in the Great Pyramid. Nobody knew there was a chamber there. Nobody even suspected it, but the scan showed that it was there, and they drilled a hole. Zahi Hawass got up on on a press release and talked about, hey, we've discovered a new chamber, and we all got to see pictures of it. So we know the technology works.
This guy would swash a mean buckle. Holy shit. Yeah, I think the accent kind of matches too, right? So, it doesn't surprise me that there are chambers and passages within the pyramids that nobody knew about before. Just think of the existing ancient Egyptian temples. Think of how people have been building buildings and ships and other things that contain people for thousands of years. It's no surprise. I would be more surprised if you told me that there weren't passages and chambers that we haven't discovered inside there than I would be if you said that those do exist. So I couldn't, other than showing signs of wealth and grandeur for the pharaohs that had the pyramids built, I couldn't see how the pyramid would be of any kind of value if it was mostly solid. The big question for my premise is why would you build something so large that is mostly unusable?
They found something that nobody suspected was there, and they drilled into it and they figured it out, and they're like, hey, here's this new chamber. Now, while this experiment's been going on for a long time. There is new technology now being used to explore the Great Void. In fact, Matt Bell, a good friend of mine, the guy who owns a lot of these ancient Egyptian hardstone vases that I talk about on this channel, he is helping to fund a robotic exploration.
You can just buy them.
That Great Void. That should be happening towards the end of this year, if not early into next year. So we're seeing examples of new technology really being used to uncover these hidden mysteries and hidden aspects and characteristics of this architecture from our past. I mean, I have to throw in here also another good example of this is really the VaseScan project. All of the new technology, the LiDAR scans, the CT X-ray scans, the use of modern metrology software and modern engineering techniques to deconstruct some of these ancient hardstone artifacts is only showing us that we're learning more and more and more about the precision engineering and design that went into these things. And I think it's proving to be quite a conundrum for the standard model of history. But again, this is the effect of using new technology and using our ability to its fullest to try and explore these topics. And so it's been an interesting year for that, and I think we're only going to keep going forward. However,
dickheads scratch their names into the walls. Yeah. It's funny you say that because there's a theory that one of the pyramids has only been attributed to Ramses because his name, well, the fact is one of the pyramids is attributed to being built by Ramses because they found his name in a cartouche in a chamber at the top of the pyramid. There is a theory that the pyramid is much, much, much older than that, and we dismiss it just because we found his name scratched into the stone in the pyramid. So it could not have been belonged to Ramses, and someone just wrote his name there, and we said, oh, must be his name's there.
However, despite all of the news cycle really focusing on this and the amazing claims that were made by the Khafre
Ramses was here
about these structures.
Oh no, it's Kilroy.
Below the Giza
Kilroy
Plateau.
was here.
What if I told you that
this is the ancient pyramid of Kilroy
underground structure in Egypt had already been discovered? Discovered, but not yet explored. But it has been discovered. Not only that, but this structure has been scanned using several different techniques, including space-based deep earth penetrating techniques several times, also with other techniques, and it is 100% confirmed through all of these techniques to actually exist. Not only that, but this is something that I'm talking about that is not, you can't really consider it wildly speculative or something new. And now this isn't a criticism of the Khafre scan claims or the claims they made about the Khufu pyramid, but they are for sure speculative and they are for sure new. There's really no one else has really claimed that there are 80-foot cubic rooms and shafts that are dozens of meters wide running down 600 or 700 meters below the Giza Plateau. Nobody's talked about those existing. For sure, there are tunnels and there are passages in the ground at the Giza Plateau, but nobody has really talked about them in the context of the scale of the claims that have been made by the Khafre team. However, this place that I'm talking about has been talked about. It has been documented, not only in fairly recent times, but also throughout antiquity.
Right, and this is what I was saying, is this is much less speculation, much more evidence-based, with modern scans backing up much older written documentation.
There are a few people in our modern era who know about this, who are actively trying to pursue this and find out more and to push the exploration of this site further forward. These claims that have been made about it too, and the way that this structure and this thing has been talked about in antiquity is also quite amazing, and we're going to get into some of those examples. It's said to exceed in grandeur all of the wonders of the ancient world, and that includes the pyramids. In fact, specifically, it is said to exceed the grandeur of the pyramids of Egypt. And if
I think he's gonna say it later in the video, but I think that claim is from Herodotus, from when he visited in when Herodotus was in ancient Greece, like it's a place you can just go to. He went to the Egyptian labyrinth and wrote about it, and I think it was Herodotus that they're taking that claim of grandeur from.
If that's true, then the discovery, the uncovering, and the exploration of a site like that is said to exceed in grandeur and spectacle the pyramids of Egypt, it really should represent the discovery of the 21st century, probably of the entire millennium in the field of archaeology. However, what's really crazy about this is that this discovery of it that's happened has, quite honestly, been suppressed. There has actually been a cover-up, and we're going to get into some of the details.
By who,
of
you
that.
ask?
But I think
none
one
other
of the great things about this new technology, and particularly the fact
usual
that
suspect
a lot of this stuff is really in space, which is difficult for one particular government or entity or person. You might wonder who I'm talking about here.
I am not a scientist.
To control is that they can't control it, right? It's in space. So there are opportunities here to explore this site and to get this information out and hopefully to move forward with its exploration. So I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you may not have heard of this, but I am, of course, talking about the Great Labyrinth of ancient Egypt. Now, when I say labyrinth, the word, I don't think the Great Lost Labyrinth of ancient Egypt is the one that comes to mind. If you're of my age, and I might be dating myself a little bit here when I talk about Labyrinth, the first thing you might think about is this movie, the David Bowie movie with all the Henson puppets with Jennifer Connelly. Fantastic movie from back in the day. It's one from the childhood that probably sticks in a lot of people's brains these days, back when they made pretty good movies and Hollywood was doing its thing. The ancient Egyptian labyrinth might still not be the one that you think about when you think of real labyrinth. In fact, most people, I suspect, when you say labyrinth, think that it probably originated from the ancient Greek labyrinth, the one on the island of Crete. Now, this is one of those ancient Greek myths or legends or stories that's part of their mythology. Most people probably have a passing understanding or awareness of this with the Minotaur. It was built for King Minos by a guy named Daedalus, who was the father of Icarus. Icarus being the guy who, flew.
Yeah, Jennifer Connelly is trapped in the ancient Egyptian monolith, or ancient Egyptian labyrinth.
A little too close to the sun, and the wax on his wings melted and they fell to the death. I think Daedalus was supposed to be with him at the time. But yeah, so you also have Theseus, who went into the labyrinth.
Why is the Minotaur peeking around the corner like that? Well, I mean, much like other wild animals, he's more scared of you than you are of it.
There's a whole story of him following and unraveling his cotton thread so he wouldn't get lost in the labyrinth. He was going down there to save the maiden because they were sacrificing maidens to this beast that lived in the labyrinth, the Minotaur, who was a half-bull, half-man creature. And
Looks like a
Minotaur
nice mouse with horns.
By Theseus.
Maybe
and
he was nice.
Story,
I don't think everyone tried to hug him. They just tried to kill him.
The origins of it, particularly the origins of the Minotaur, if you want to find out how sort of twisted some of the ancient Greek myths and stories and legends will get, you can look into where the Minotaur came from. I'll let everyone look that one up in their own time. It has to do with Poseidon and King Minos' wife and a big white bull, and yeah, you don't really want to know the rest of it. However, this whole story and this whole legend, even though the word labyrinth does come from the Greek, like labyrinthus, the etymology of the word does come to us from the Greeks, the whole idea of the labyrinth, it's said that this whole concept was inspired and built because the Greeks knew about the ancient Egyptian labyrinth. And we can go back to early Greek writers during the period to find out that this is the case. In fact, let's look at a guy called Diodorus Siculus, who was an ancient Greek historian, originated from Sicily, in his Histories Volume 1 in around the 1st century BCE. And he wrote this about the Cretan labyrinth. He said, "It is even said by some that Daedalus crossed over to Egypt, and in wonder at the skill shown in the building, built for Minos, king of Crete, a labyrinth like that in Egypt, in which, so the tales go, the creature called the Minotaur was kept."
Daedalus being the architect
He goes on to explain a little further that,
Greek
be
labyrinth.
that as it may, the Cretan labyrinth has completely disappeared, either through the destruction wrought by some ruler or through the ravages of time. But the Egyptian labyrinth remains absolutely perfect in its entire construction down to my time. Now, Diodorus Siculus lived and obviously visited Egypt in the 1st century.
Minotaur, legend, beast, or alien? Tape, do you work for TMZ? Is that what's going on? You're just throwing out headlines into chat? Is that what's happening here?
BC. So he's talking about the Cretan labyrinth at that point, seems to have been destroyed. It was a figure from his own history, but he evidently visited the labyrinth. And he wrote more about it. One of the other things he talked about it was this complex and crazy undulating set of passages and chambers. He says that, quote, "For once in, it is impossible to find one's way out again without difficulty, unless one lights upon a guide who is perfectly acquainted with it." So Diodorus Siculus actually visited this ancient Egyptian labyrinth, and he certainly wasn't the only one. Probably the earliest historical figure that we know of who wrote about his account of visiting the labyrinth, and probably one of the most famous people to have ever visited the labyrinth, was, of course, Herodotus. Now, Herodotus lived several centuries before Diodorus Siculus. He lived around the 5th century BC, 484 to 430 BC, and he wrote extensively about the mysteries and wonders of Egypt, including the labyrinth. Now, what he wrote about the labyrinth is quite revealing in terms of its grandeur and its scale, quoting Herodotus. "This I saw myself, and I found it greater than words can say. For if one should put together and reckon up all of the buildings and all of the great works produced by the Hellenes, they would prove to be inferior in labour and expense to this labyrinth, though it is true that both the temple at Ephesus and that at Samos are works worthy of note." So he's here explaining that the work of all of the Greeks, the Hellenes, the Hellenes, he's talking about the Greek civilization, his own civilization. Of course, Herodotus was a Greek historian as well. He wrote this particular passage in his book 2 of his histories. He's saying that all of the works of the Greeks and everything that's impressive and amazing about the ancient Greek civilization paled into comparison than simply just the labyrinth. The amount of labor it would take to do everything that the ancient Greek civilization did would be less than that required to build the labyrinth. He also compared the labyrinth to the other parts of Egypt, quoting Herodotus. "The pyramids were also greater than words can say, and each one of them is equal to many works of the Hellenes, great as they may be, but the labyrinth surpasses even the pyramids." Now, this is an incredible claim, because if you're like me and you've ever been to the Giza Plateau.
So you have to know that when Herodotus would have written this, the pyramids still would have had their polished casing stones, their exterior polished casing stones of white limestone or white marble, with the highly decorated or possibly even gilded capstones at the very top. So for Herodotus to say that, with the pyramids being in such a magnificent condition, really is saying something about the labyrinth.
Been to Egypt. I go all the time. I mean, I must have been 15 times now. I mean, just at least to the Giza Plateau, you go multiple times on a particular trip, but every time, this doesn't get old. I've stood in front of these incredible stone triangles in the desert. Or
maybe the pyramids were already in ruins by the time Herodotus got there. That could be a possibility. I think there's some evidence to actually debate how old the pyramids actually are, and it may not align with the mainstream consensus anymore.
These amazing pieces of architecture, of ancient work, and you just marvel at their size and scale. It's really hard to comprehend until you're actually there and you see them in person. It's phenomenal, and it never gets old. So every time you go there and you see them, you're like, oh my God, they're so massive, they're so impressive. And then the more you learn about them, their attributes, the precision, everything that goes into them, that makes them incredibly impressive. And for somebody like Herodotus to say that this labyrinth exceeds the pyramids in grandeur, that is an astonishing claim. But that's not all we have to go on in the labyrinth either. We have a number of historical authors who actually got pretty specific about how it was built and what it was made up of. Let's continue with Herodotus and learn a little bit more about the structure of the labyrinth. This is what he wrote about that. It has 12 courts covered in, with gates facing one another, 6 upon the north side and 6 upon the south, joining on one to another, and the same wall surrounds them all outside.
So it's fully
and there
enclosed.
are in it 2 kinds of chambers, the one kind below the ground and the other kind above these, 3,000 in number, of each kind 1,500. Herodotus here is telling us a little bit about the structure of the labyrinth. He's talking about the fact that there are 12 great courts that have gates that face each other. So there's at least 12 large courtyards as part of this structure. There is one single wall surrounding the entire thing, and at least 2 levels that he knows of, with something like 1,500 rooms, I assume, that is in addition to these great courts that are in the labyrinth. Now, Herodotus was also being quite honest with us in the next passage that he says, in that he never visited the lower layers. He only heard about them. And what he wrote about them was, accordingly, we speak of the chambers below by what we received from hearsay, while those above we saw ourselves and found them to be works of more than human greatness. For the passages through the chambers and the goings this way and that through the courts, which were admirably adorned, afforded endless matter for marvel, as we went through from a court to the chambers beyond it, and from the chambers to colonnades, and from the colonnades to other rooms, and then from the chambers again to other courts." End quote. Herodotus didn't see, he was told about the lower layers, and he's talking about that there are chambers below the ground, but there, within that whole structure, there are
absolutely
massive courts,
massive.
and he's here describing the winding passages and the labyrinthian nature of the labyrinth. Herodotus also gives us more clues about what the labyrinth was made of, and his impressions of the stonework and the actual workmanship of what was going on inside the labyrinth. So continuing with Herodotus here, quote, "Over the whole of these is a roof made of stone like the walls, and the walls are covered with figures carved upon them, each court being surrounded with pillars of white stone, fitted together most perfectly. And at the end of the labyrinth, by the corner of it, there is a pyramid of 40 fathoms, upon which large figures are carved. And to this there is a way made underground." So these are really important aspects of the labyrinth that Herodotus is describing. Things we should keep in mind as we go forward. He's talking about white columns that are fitted together most perfectly. The fact that the roof is made of stone, the same stone as the walls. And at the end of the labyrinth, or attached to it somehow, probably via an underground passage, there's a pyramid. And at that time, the pyramid sounds like it was cased, and it actually had inscriptions on the outside of the casing with these large figures. Now, Herodotus isn't the only one who's talked about these different aspects of the pyramid and these different, I guess, characteristics of it. So let's return to Diodorus Siculus, who wrote a little bit more about the specifics of what's in the labyrinth, quoting Diodorus Siculus. "While in respect of carving and other works of craftsmanship, they left no room for their successors to surpass them. For when one had entered the sacred enclosure, one found a temple surrounded by columns, 40 to each side, and this building had a roof made of a single stone, carved with panels and richly adorned with excellent paintings." First of all, Diodorus here is saying that literally it's perfection. Like, he's saying that there was no room left to succeed the craftsmanship of how this thing was built. He's also describing the fact that in these columned halls, like, so remember, Herodotus talked about 12 of them. He's talking about entering one of these temples, one of these columned halls that was surrounded by these columns that, Herodotus describes as these white stone columns, but there were 40 of them to each side, and that this entire building had a roof made of a single stone. Now, I actually am quite skeptical about this claim that it was a single stone. However, I think what he's describing is something that we can see on other ancient megalithic sites, places like the Valley Temple in Giza, the Sphinx Temple, probably the Assyrian. Like
So what I haven't really heard is that the upper level, I don't think they said whether or not the upper level was underground or not. If it is underground, especially the lower portion, the second level, which was said to be underground, how did they light it? And depending on if they could light it, what was the purpose? So I don't think anybody's ever gone into speculating what the purpose of the labyrinth was. I think we're still in the early stages of actually finding it and like figuring out like its layout and arrangement. White walls would be very smudgy. Yeah. Unless they had lighting somehow. Egyptians were known for using polished copper and bronze mirrors to reflect light to light some spaces, but something this large, you would need an incredible amount of mirrors and light shafts to be able to do that. So it may be dependent on what the labyrinth was for to depend on how it was lit, if it was lit.
But the Valley Temple in Giza, when you visit this today, you know, you're looking at these massive granite walls. There was a granite roof on this thing. And remember that when this thing was finished and these walls were polished, you probably couldn't see the joins in the stone. There are only a few spots in the Valley Temple where you can see the original...
No, this isn't it.
Facing the original surface of the...
What we're looking at here is the Valley Temple, and I think Karnassus? This is not the labyrinth, but where we're comparing the written description of the labyrinth to the fabrication that we see here at the Valley Temple.
The stone, how finely wrought and polished it was. The surface has since spalled off, like the actual outer surface of the granite. And this has happened over thousands, maybe many thousands of years of erosion. And what happens when the surface spalls off on these blocks, it spalls off a little more on those, you know, the joins between the blocks, because you have that corner there, so that a bit more of the corner comes off, and the lines between the blocks become pronounced. But however, when this thing was flat and polished, you probably couldn't have been even able to determine or see the joins between the blocks. There are a few examples of where you can't even determine and see the line between the blocks because the joinery is so fine. And when the
stone especially stones, abutting stones that are made out of the same type of stone, can be fairly easy to hide a joint in, because it's so the pattern in the stone is so abstract that you can kind of make one disappear into the other.
The whole surface was polished, that same thing would have been in effect. And indeed, that's what it sounds like to me is happening with the roof that he's describing as a single stone. It is probably the same type of building, the same type of architecture that we see in places like the Valley Temple, which are the most mysterious, the most ancient, the most megalithic of all of the sites in ancient Egypt. I've talked about this place extensively in my work. The other part that Diodorus talks about are these huge columned halls with 40 columns to each side. And when he says that, I'm reminded of places like this, which is the great columned hall of the Luxor Temple at Luxor in Upper Egypt. There might be 40 columns in this picture or in this courtyard, something like that. I've never actually taken the time to count them. But remember, Diodorus actually said there were 40 to each side. So each hall had at least 80 columns. And there were something like 12 of them, and 12 on its own is quite an interesting number from a processional perspective. This gives you an idea of the kind of scale we might be talking about in this building when one of these halls...
So that pink granite they were showing those stones made out of, that's a fairly common type of granite that you can also get in the Northeast US. I forget what it's called. It's not all that uncommon, and it could be rose quartz. I don't remember if it is or not. But I mean, like, so quartz is a really common mineral found in granite, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was.
Contains twice as many columns as, you know, the hall that we're seeing here at Luxor. So again, let's look at some more of these ancient accounts and look at some of these other clues that are left to us from these other authors. Let's talk about Strabo. Now, Strabo was an ancient Greek geographer who lived essentially across year zero. He was around the same time as Jesus Christ, was said to exist from 64 BC to around year 19 of the Common Era.
That guy was old.
He's best known for his work Geographica, and he talked about visiting the labyrinth as well in his work, and this is what he wrote about it. Quote, "In addition to these things, there is the edifice of the labyrinth, which is a building quite equal to the pyramids." So maybe he's not being quite as generous as Herodotus in saying that it exceeds the pyramids, but he's saying it's quite equal to the pyramids, which is still, that's a hell of a claim. "It is a great palace made up of many palaces, for such is the number of peristyle courts which lie contiguous within one another." So he's, again, reinforcing that there are many palaces or many of these courtyards with all of these peristyle halls and courts that have all of these columns in them. Again, we're seeing more eyewitness accounts of the same thing. Before the entrances, there lie what might be called hidden chambers, which are long and many in number, and have paths running through one another which twist and turn, so that no one can enter or leave without a guide. So again, this is the...
So, I'm imagining conflicting arrangements of this labyrinth, because you have these claims that there are all these pillars and all of these chambers and courtyards, but then there are passages that twist and turn, which, though, there's, how do you juxtapose those together to come up with a singular structure? I still don't. That's the part I don't understand. How do you go from like Luxor, where you have all of these pillars and courtyards that are, you know, squared with each other, to having a labyrinth which has the same architectural features, but then also twisting and turning paths? I don't understand that part.
Labyrinthian nature of the structure, right? He's talking about that there are passages that, and Herodotus talked about this too, you go from this way to that, from this room to that, through different passages, that you need a guide to get in here, that you can actually get lost.
Unless they are, it's all rectangular, and they're just
get into some trouble,
getting confused, and saying it feels like twisting and turning.
In South America, the labyrinths that exist under the ground, that are said to exist on many of these sites, and there's actually been stories of people getting into them and actually getting lost and dying, like a few school kids did at one point. I think some young people got in there, and it's one of the reasons that they've been barring up entrances in places like Cusco to the underground passages. They're news at the moment. They're starting to rediscover some of those things. At least they're trying to get into them again. They're scanning them. They know they're there. They're just trying to get into them.
Probably the unique connection. Those people, these three guys, the two of them disappeared and one came out through that hole. He said that their friends, they took another ways inside. So
they got separated.
Wow. Yeah. Because there was no way to come out.
Yeah.
So he was lucky to come out, but after a few weeks he will die also.
Yeah. That's insane.
No, that's a terrible way to go.
Don't get lost.
Let's go.
Let's go. Bring some caving rope today, didn't we?
What are these beautiful knobs here?
Come on.
That's a huge altar.
Let's go.
Huge niche.
Oh, there's like coins and coca leaves.
Yeah, it's people.
It was something very special.
See?
Okay.
That's how you know you need to go. There's money and cocaine.
Everything here up. So that would be a big plaza. Big space. I see. So
Where is this exactly? So I can make sure I avoid it.
Damn it.
Where?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Really wants to get lost and die.
Down in there and
Yes.
get lost and die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, bro. Let's start another legend.
Okay.
Yeah.
First,
I will.
open it.
I'll see you in the
go.
field. Yeah, I'll meet you guys at Sexy Woman
I
tomorrow.
can give you the key. You start,
I'll go.
and then we'll see.
See you up there.
I will tie a rope.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing that I think we should be doing at the Labyrinth, but we'll get to that. So continuing with Strabo, he talks a little bit more again about the quality of the building of the Labyrinth. He says, and the wonder of it is that the roofs of each chambers are made of single stones, and the width of the hidden chambers is spanned in the same way by monolithic beams of outstanding size, for nowhere is wood or any other material included. At the end of this building, which occupies an area of more than a stade, stands the tomb, a pyramid on an oblong base. He's reinforcing what I think it was Herodotus said about this, that there is a pyramid attached to the Labyrinth. He's also talking about the fact that the chambers have these roofs made up of single stones, and that the stones that span, at least the ones that span the ceiling, are monolithic beams of stone of outstanding size. He gives us another clue here about a building that I think might be similar in construction style to the Labyrinth, because he says something interesting here. He says, and above this city stands Abydos, in which there is the Memnonian, a palace wonderfully constructed of...
So is the pyramid underground? I think Ben actually, he gets to talking about that, and I don't remember the name of it, but I think the pyramid that these scripts talk about is one of the smaller step pyramids that is above ground. But isn't Abydos the name of a city from the Stargate movie? Memnonian is fun. Yeah. Silly words.
Massive stonework, in the same way as we have said the Labyrinth was built, though the Memnonian differs in being simple in structure. Isn't that interesting? The Memnonian, something he's calling the Memnonian. He says it is in Abydos. So if you know much about ancient Egypt, or if you know much about what's at Abydos, and this was a place...
Yeah. The ancient culture copied Stargate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Abydos. Everyone knows where that is. You go to Egypt, you go through the Stargate, and then you're at Abydos. Yep.
Place that Strabo is also have known to have visited in those ancient times. I think he's talking about this structure. I think he's talking about the Assyrion. This is the same thing. In the Assyrion, you have these massive stone beams, like 80, 90-ton stone beams that are spanning the roof. They're also...
So this is what they think the Memnonian is, and Strabos is saying that the Labyrinth is of similar construction, but the Memnonian is simpler. Which is wild when you look at this.
These big granite beams, the outside's all quartzite, but they span the roof. And he's talking about the fact that these things are spanning the roof in the same manner as this building. However, this building here, the Assyrion,
look at the water,
differs from the Labyrinth in that it's simple.
I bet it tastes good.
Like he's calling the Assyrion simple, and it's anything but simple, at least to my way of thinking. The Assyrion is essentially a constructed island. I mean, we know there's like 20 plus meters of depth on either end of this thing. It's essentially a big stone structure that you are standing on top of when you go into it today. There is chambers. There are multiple blocks going down below it. You can see in older photographs when a lot more water was pumped out of there that the layers keep on going down. It's just mind-blowing to me that this is just the Labyrinth
still water, yummy,
described as being just so superior and way more complex than the Assyrion. But the real key here is that it's being described as being built in the same way as these mysterious megalithic structures from ancient Egypt, the Valley Temple, the Assyrion, the mortuary temple up on the second pyramid, these types of things, like the stuff that's the most mysterious, the most precise, and I think the most eroded and the most likely to be much older than the dynastic Egyptian civilization. So, Strabo was known to have visited the Assyrion in the 1st century BC. He described it as a royal building made of solid stone with workmanship similar to the Labyrinth. He also talks about some of the builders. I mean, so he's known to have visited these sites. I think he's directly showing us and talking about the fact that these two things are constructed in similar ways. Continuing on with historical accounts, who else has visited and written about the Labyrinth? Well, there was Pliny the Elder, who is a Roman author, who's a naturalist. He was a naval and army commander. Gaius Plinius Secundus, otherwise known as Pliny the Elder, lived in the 1st century, or I guess it was the 1st century AD, 23 to 79 in the Common Era. Also talked about the Labyrinth in his natural histories, quoting Pliny the Elder, "Let us speak also of labyrinths, quite the most extraordinary works on which men have spent their money, but not, as may be thought, figments of the imagination. There still exists, even now in Egypt, the one which was built first according to tradition 3,600 years ago.
That's super old.
At any rate, that Daedalus used this as the model for the labyrinth which he built in Crete is beyond doubt. It is equally clear that he imitated only 100th part of it. Pliny here is telling us that, okay, these are not figments of the imagination. It's massive, like the one that we talk about in Crete.
Can you imagine the mythology that goes along with the Cretan labyrinth? And then that's only 100th the size of this Egyptian labyrinth? I think to say that you would get easily lost in it is maybe the understatement of the last 2 millennia.
That was built for King Minos was only barely 100th the part of the size and scale of the Egyptian labyrinth. And he's also saying something else that's very interesting here to me, that one that he says that was built first, according to tradition, 3,600 years ago. That would be 3,600 BC, roughly, because Pliny is around in sort of 1st century AD. Now, the ancient Egyptian civilization is not even supposed to have started until roughly 3000 BC, and that's the first two dynasties, the Archaic period. The Old Kingdom, where they actually supposedly did this megalithic building, things like the Valley Temple, wasn't until 2700 BC. So he's talking about a structure that supposedly has been around for damn near 1,000 years earlier than that. And you're going back into different climatic periods. Watch my video on the erosional difference.
There is a massive amount of evidence that these ancient Egyptian structures are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, much older than anyone is allowing to be published.
At the Giza,
and that blows my mind, because that also is plausible, because the latest evidence of how long humans have been around, I think they found Homo sapiens, specifically Homo sapien skeletons that push our origin as a species date back to like 300,000, maybe 350,000 years ago. And that's back just from like 180,000 years, which was kind of the accepted norm when I was in school. So within 40 years, we've doubled the accepted time length that humans have been on Earth, like specifically Homo sapiens.
The plateau, I think the labyrinth fits this model. I'm interested in what tradition he's talking about, because the modern, I guess, accounting or the standard model version of the labyrinth is very minimal. Like they certainly don't attribute.
There's also evidence, loose evidence, that hasn't reached consensus yet, that suggests that Homo sapiens have been around for 800,000 years. So nearly, Homo sapiens could possibly be nearly a 1,000,000-year-old species. And if that's the case, then it would be completely plausible that these structures in ancient Egypt are much older than we've been told or hypothesized.
It to being Old Kingdom. In fact, you go and look at the Wikipedia page for the labyrinth, and it's pretty weak. Like it's very slender. Like there's not much to it, and they just say, it's been destroyed, it was carried away, and a lot of its stone was taken, there's nothing there anymore. It was all Middle Kingdom potentially. All of this data is typically just ignored by the standard model.
You're gonna need to do a lot of reading now,
because these guys are giving us first-hand accounts of.
I mean, yeah, you definitely should. You could also watch the videos from this channel. I really like this channel. It's super intriguing, and it really like scratches that like curiosity itch my brain has. It's very good. I'll go to bed and watch these, and sometimes I stay up way too late because they get a little too interesting for me to fall asleep to. So it's very good. Link it. I can link this video. There are many videos on this channel. A lot of them are a few years old. Like some of the really good ones are like 5 years old, but with anything archaeological, I mean, 5 years old is pretty much up-to-date info. So you can go back to the beginning of this channel and get info that's fairly still accurate.
Them actually visiting and exploring these sites. So continuing with Pliny here, he says, and he tells us a little bit more again how the labyrinth was made and the type of stone that was used in it. He says, the Egyptian specimen, to my considerable astonishment, has its entrance and columns made of Korean marble.
Go give
while
Ben
the rest of it is of
watch and a like.
granite. Such masses being put together as time itself cannot dissolve, even with the help of the Heracleopolitans, for they have regarded the building with extraordinary hatred. End quote. So, again, let's unpack what he's saying. when he's talking about Parian marble or marble, you know what he's talking about? He's talking about calcite. He's talking about white calcite. And he's saying
did
the
something to him
columns
last
are
time
made
I
of white
talked?
calcite.
Good.
That's an important point.
It's one of my
The
new
other
favorite
stone
YouTube
that
channels.
he's calling out here is, of course, Aswan granite.
He also, so this is what got me onto this channel, is Ben did a recent interview with Joe Rogan. Like it was within the last like couple weeks or within the month or something. And they were talking about finding the labyrinth. And that's what got me to this channel and like looking to these videos. So if you want to go watch the Joe Rogan interview with him too, that's also very good.
Like it's the granite that comes from Aswan. Most commonly, it's the pink granite, but there are other types of granite that do come from Aswan. It's not like the quarry there where the unfinished obelisk is the only quarry. There were dozens of quarries. It's just Aswan in that part of Upper Egypt is a part where the igneous rock has actually been pushed up out. It doesn't have sedimentary layers of rock on top of it, so they could mine it and get at it. And it was obviously of high quality to be used in building sites. So tens of thousands of tons, probably millions of tons of that stuff were pulled out by whoever was building all of these structures at some point. And he's saying that there's such a mass of it at this place that even the quarrying that's happened there, the destruction that's happening there by the Heracleopolitans cannot diminish it. Evidently, he's talking about the fact that there are people that are just using it as a quarry, which is also reinforced later on, as we'll get into. But, he's just saying there's so much of it here that these guys can't destroy it because they hate it or whatever, or they're just quarrying it. I suspect this is a description of them quarrying and taking the stone to be used in other projects, which is for time immemorial.
I want to get to parts of it where that actually starts to show you like the scans and stuff. Let's go here. Maybe we'll do a little bit of this so you can see at least talk about drawings and stuff of what it might look like if it'll load.
And the labyrinth changes its structure. Who knows, right? These are the accounts that we get. Interestingly, after the classical authors of antiquity, these guys like Herodotus, Pomponius Mela, Diodorus Siculus, they had their accounts, and after the fall of the Roman Empire, we have, kind of the Dark Ages, and it wasn't really until the time of the Renaissance, the fall of the Roman Empire, 476 roughly of the Common Era. We had the Dark Ages starting around 1000, the year 1000. Renaissance started in around the late 1300s, 14th century, and it wasn't until then that artists in the Renaissance started to take another interest in the labyrinth, and from that period we get some illustrations based on these historical accounts and potentially of actual visits to the site that come to us. These are a couple of examples of them. You can see here the one on the left, it shows 12 massive courts surrounding this like labyrinthian structure. It's almost like a symbolic representation of the labyrinth, I think. And then you have this continuous wall that runs around the outside, but there are 12 massive courts here, almost like there are 12 symbols of the zodiac, 12 disciples of Jesus. I wonder why it's always 12 months of the year, 12 constellations in the sky. I mean, this is all zodiac processional stuff, right? 12 is a very interesting processional number from the great year and the great cycle. And then the image on the right is a bit more of the traditional labyrinthian sort of confusing, convoluted pathways example of what it might have been like. Remember?
So the one on the right looks less confusing to me. Because if you know it's laid out in a grid pattern, why couldn't you just say, oh, I'll just take this path to the middle until I get to an intersection, and then I'll just go this way, and boom, there's the exit. So I'm inclined to say that it was built more like somehow it was actually built and arranged like the drawing on the right, but somehow felt like it was built like the drawing on the left.
That
or maybe the art and decoration within the labyrinth was the style of the left, but it was actually built like the right.
The description says that there were 1,500 rooms on each level, so 3,000 rooms in total, with passages going
And
between them.
those
and then
have to
also
be
these
incredibly
giant
small
courtyards.
rooms.
One of my favorite depictions of the labyrinth is actually this one, which was engraved onto copper plate that shows you kind of this depiction of these massive columned halls beneath the ground, and on top of the ground here there's like a town, a Roman or Ptolemaic era little town that people may have no clue that what's beneath the ground here. And this image really strikes me and reminds me of the Mines of Moria and that scene in The Lord of the Rings when Gandalf holds up his staffs and says, perhaps we can chance a little bit more light. And he lights it up and you just see this incredible, massive open space. You just got to wonder if the Balrog's still down here or not, right? But it seems like it's something like that. Absolutely incredible. And in fact, this depiction happens to also match, as we'll see, the accounts of where this place actually is, because we happen to know where it is. We get a lot of clues from these descriptions. There's descriptions talking about a pyramid being attached to it. I didn't get into the quotes, but the authors also talk about a big lake being nearby. In fact, they talk about Lake Moeris. They actually named the lake. There's a nearby city that is described in these historical accounts, a place called Crocodipolis or Arsinoe, and we kind of know where that is. Grandiose as these historical depictions are, there's really never been any super big mystery about where the labyrinth is likely to be. In fact, most Egyptologists and historians have all typically agreed on the location for the labyrinth based on these historical accounts, and that's in this area that you see right here. This is an area called the Fayum. I'm showing you, it's a picture of the Nile Valley. You've got Cairo up in the north, and as we go down south, the green line here is really the Nile Valley, the verdant green line that follows the Nile down south. And that big leaf-shaped thing off to the left of the Nile Valley is a place called the Fayum. This is a big depression. It's today used as an agricultural zone. You can see all of it. It's actually connected to the Nile Valley through a channel. And before, when the Nile used to flood, this place would flood. It would get this annual inundation. And there's a lake today called Karun Lake in the northwest side of the Fayum. But in ancient times, there was Lake Moeris was here, and it was actually a much bigger portion of the Fayum that was contained by Lake Moeris. And in the neck, what's called the neck of the Fayum, this little green connector between these zones, this is the area where all of the modern historians and archaeologists tend to agree this is likely where the labyrinth was. And in fact, if you zoom right in on a part of the neck of the Fayum, there's a little place called Hawara, and on it stands the pyramid of Amenemhat III. And this is at Hawara. And it's said to be this area around here and below and all around this space is where the labyrinth is. And funnily enough, if you actually zoom in on Google Earth, it actually says labyrinth. Like, it'll tell you, okay, yep, this is where the labyrinth is. If you go to Hawara, I've been to Hawara several
Google
times.
Doesn't lie.
I've been fascinated by this story for many years.
Okay. I want to skip ahead a little more. There's between where we're here now and where we're about to go in the video, there's all kinds of like crazy cool information, but I want to skip ahead to like the actual like scans and stuff. So I guess right here, we'll watch a little bit of this.
Or at least one of the lower layers of the labyrinth, that this structure still exists. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because it's only been in modern years, using modern technology, that this hypothesis has been pretty much fully vindicated. And, this all started in around 2008 with a guy named Louis de Cordier and his expedition to Egypt, which was called the Matterhorn expedition. Louis de Cordier is a philanthropist. He's a Belgian artist. He was behind putting together a expedition to Hawara to go and search for the labyrinth using modern technology, things like ground penetrating radar, seismic tomography, geomagnetism, things like that. He partnered up with the Supreme Council of Antiquities, as well as the NRIAG, which is the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, which is located in Cairo. Those are the guys that do the technical work on this. He had full permission for this expedition. He literally had permission from Zahi Hawass at the time, who was the Minister of Antiquities back in 2008. They scanned this whole site using a whole bunch of different techniques. Like I mentioned, ground penetrating radar, geomagnetism, electrical resistivity tomography, very low frequency electromagnetic scanning, lots of different techniques.
Contemporary,
what was the
modern
result? Well, they found the labyrinth, and
technology.
Turns out it's still there. During the expedition, they scanned on 2 sites basically to the south of the pyramid at Hawara. One large site was to the east of the Barwabi Canal, and one site was to the west on the other side of the canal. You can see here a picture of the guy doing the geomagnetism survey on the site. But these sites, like, you've got to imagine, it's 150 meters by 100 meters, and then 100 meters by 80 meters. So some big zones were actually scanned, and turns out they found the labyrinth. It gets literally right here. You can see at a depth of 8 meters using the VLF tools. You can see the labyrinthian nature of the results.
So this is what confuses me based when you compare this scan to the writings about how it was laid out and then the artist depictions from way back. I don't understand how they can be the same. So I'm having a really hard time visualizing what the labyrinth actually looks like.
There's blocks and channels and there's passages. This is not a natural formation at all. They found the labyrinth. And here you can see their results from all of these different techniques put together, what they found. So at the top layers here in the green, you see this sort of chaotic, down to about 3-4 meters below ground level. This is the Ptolemaic and probably Persian period town. This was the remains of the mud brick town that actually was built on this site. Likely was the industry of quarrying that was around here for centuries. The ground surface up here, this is what's remaining in the first few meters from this town. It's not part of the labyrinth. Today, in our modern times, the water table is up at around that 4 to 5 meter level on the site. And then you can see here at 5.
So we may have skipped over it, but the reason we can't go down into the labyrinth is because there was a dam built so that Egypt didn't have to rely on the natural flooding of the Nile. They could just have that water supply all the time. Well, that's great for the agriculture, but what happened was they built that dam, created a man-made lake, which is upstream of all of this stuff. But what happened is the groundwater downstream of the dam ended up rising. So now the entire labyrinth is like underwater now, where it wasn't when Petrie back in like the early 1900s went to go explore it, because the dam hadn't been built. The dam was built in like the 60s. We can't go down in there yet without constant pumping of hundreds, thousands of gallons of water a minute. So there's an entire section that talks about that in this video if you want to go check it out. Drones, though, you could do underwater drones. They'd have to be tethered, though, to be able to pilot them. I don't know if we have the technology developed yet to be able to do studies like that. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know.
5 meters, that was as far as Petrie dug in different places at Hawara, and he found that slab. Now, all of the interesting results that are coming back from
James Cameron,
these different techniques exist below that slab.
He just CGI'd
so these
the whole
are
thing.
the possible labyrinthian structure. Now, quoting from the Matahar expedition themselves, this is what they wrote about this. Quote, "In the upper ground zone above the water level, walls appear at the shallow depth ranging between 1.5 to 2.5 meters. These decayed mud brick features are very chaotic and show no consistent grid structure and can be comfortably related with the historic period of the Ptolemaic and Roman times. Underneath this upper zone, below the artificial stone surface, appears, at a depth of 8 to 12 meters, a grid structure of gigantic size made of very high resistivity material."
He'd pilot his own submersible through it first. Well, at least he would have the engineering and there would be no danger of implosion.
Like granite stone. This states the presence of a colossal archaeological feature below the labyrinth foundation zone of Petrie, which also has to be reconsidered as the roof of the still existing labyrinth.
Too soon? Not really.
The conclusion of the geoarchaeological expedition counters in a scientific way the idea that the labyrinth was destroyed as a stone quarry in Ptolemaic times and validates the authenticity of the classical author reports. The Matterhorn Expedition Geophysical Survey confirms the presence of archaeological features at the Labyrinth area south of the Heuer Pyramid. These features, covering an underground area of several hectares, have the prominent signature of vertical walls on the geophysical results. The vertical walls, with an average thickness of several meters.
So this may be confusing because it's looking downward, showing the town layer and the labyrinth layer. Which one? The scan image? This one? Oh, I see what you mean. No. That's showing at a depth of 8 meters. So that's the labyrinth part. Because, so you can see right here it says depth minus 8 meters. That's 8 meters below surface. And then here, that's right here. This would be the bottom of the labyrinth itself, where the bottom of the town is just above minus 4 meters. So I think what we might be seeing here are foundational pieces of the labyrinth, and maybe there are steps or structural foundation type stuff. Can you look past the town layer to see only the labyrinth layer when scanning from ground level? I think so. I think there's some kind of method with this technology where you can see slices of your scans like you would in an MRI.
Covering an underground area of several hectares, have the prominent signature.
Ooh, we got ads starting in 5 seconds. So I will see you after the ads, and we'll continue this a little bit more. Okay. All right, see you in a bit. All right, let's get into this.
Of vertical walls on the geophysical results.
Let me back up so we can hear the beginning
of
what he's got
of the
written
classical
here.
Author reports. The Matterhorn Expedition Geophysical Survey confirms the presence of archaeological features at the Labyrinth area south of the Heuer Pyramid. These features, covering an underground area of several hectares.
So it's the Heuer Pyramid of Amenemhet III, which is very visible above ground. That's the pyramid that was written about in association with the labyrinth. Plus all of the other location clues that the writings gave us is how they were able to pretty much determine where to look.
Have the prominent signature of vertical walls on the geophysical results. The vertical walls, with an average thickness of several meters, are connected to shape nearly closed rooms, which are interpreted to be
Amenemhet onomatopoeia. Yeah, for sure. Man, as much as I love ancient history, the fucking names kill me, man. I just can't do it sometimes.
Huge in number. Consequently, the Geophysics Survey, initiated with the permission of Dr. Zahi Hawass, the President of the Supreme Council of Antiquities.
With the permission of Dr. Zahi Hawass, who was at the time the President of the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt.
And conducted by the NRIAG with the support of Ghent University, can now officially verify the...
I think Ghent University is a fairly prestigious university in Belgium, I think. They do an incredible amount of archaeological work.
Occurrence of big parts of the labyrinth as described by the classic authors at the study area. They found the labyrinth, right? They found the labyrinth. So how come this wasn't big news? This should be world news.
Yeah, fuck that guy all to hell. Yeah. Chief cockblocker of modern discovery. Yep. Which I don't know why. He must have been given an agenda from the Egyptian government, or if you want to go even further, some like Illuminati type organization, if you want to get into like conspiratorial stuff, because there is evidence to say that if we actually found out the truth about ancient Egypt and all of these megalithic structures, it could turn history on its head, and not that it would create upheaval in the world, but it might lead to the population starting to question the authority of the current authorities. You think he's selling shit for big bucks and doesn't want to get found out by his country or anyone? I think the Egyptian government is complicit. I think he was given an agenda by some authority over him to operate in the way that he operates.
Right? It's like, you can imagine what happened with the Kafre scan. Like, that came out, it was headline news around the world. Piers Morgan's doing shows. It's on the news. It's like mainstream media's covering it. How come this didn't register on anybody's radar? Well, they tried. So part of this expedition was Ghent University in Belgium. There was a public lecture that was put on by the team and Louis de Cordier. It was barely attended by a few Belgian press. They apparently weren't very impressed with it. But then the project was quite deliberately shut down. And this was 2008, and they were told that they couldn't publish any details. What happened here, and this is quoting the Matterhorn expedition, quoting Louis de Cordier specifically, is this. He said, "The conclusion of the Hawara geophysical survey is, however, still waiting to be internationally released by Dr. Zahi Hawass, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities." Now, this is a pretty common practice. You might wonder, how come Zahi's got control over this? Well, pretty much the way it works in Egypt, and this is to this day, it's been worked this way for decades now, is that there are a lot of foreign institutions, different universities from different parts of the world.
Yeah, everybody wants to study ancient Egypt.
The Americans,
Everyone
the
does.
French, etc. They do get permission to dig at sites. In fact, in a lot of cases, they'll get pretty much ownership of a particular site. I can tell you, for example, that the Czechs have Abu Sir. It's always it's the Czech universities doing the work out there. But the contracts that they sign and the permissions that they get to do all of this work is always bound by the condition that it's Zahi Hawass and the Supreme Council of Antiquities who get to decide about what gets released to the public. And a good example of this is the Scan Pyramids project. So if you remember, some people might know this, but back in like 2015 or 16, when they actually announced the Scan Pyramid, on their own, they went out and said, "We found these big voids in the pyramids." Now, they did this without the permission of Zahi Hawass, who then consequently flipped out. And he was on record then as saying, "Well, no, there's nothing here. They're talking rubbish. And if there is something there, then we knew about it already." Like he basically poo-pooed.
Yeah. There's nothing there. And if there is something, we already found it. For sure. Yep. My question is why? I haven't had a chance to ransack it yet. There isn't much left in Egypt to ransack that hasn't already been ransacked. And I don't think anything we find brand new, no new discoveries are going to be ransacked like they had been before. I want to know why they're so picky and choosy. Like, why keep silent the discovery of the Labyrinth, but be public about this crazy, like, shaft thing underneath the pyramids that has even less concrete evidence?
The whole idea and shut it down. Said, no, there's nothing. This is nonsense. The same thing he's saying about the Kafre scans now, just saying, it's all nonsense, it's crap. However, when it came time to go and do drill the hole and look at the little chamber behind the chevrons, who was doing the press release? Who was getting all of the glory? Who was making the announcement? It was Zahi Hawass. He was, now he's all best buddies with the Scan Pyramids project because that's the control he has. Like they have all of the control about what actually gets released to the public. Now, for whatever reason, and we'll get into that, I think, Zahi Hawass squished and just suppressed the findings of the Matterhorn expedition. They sat on it for 2 years. So Louis de Cordier sat on it for 2 years. And so around 2010, he created a website called labyrinthofegypt.com. It doesn't exist anymore. You have to go back to the Wayback Machine. Maybe you can find it. But he created a website, labyrinthofegypt.com, and on it he wrote, After 2 years of patience, we decided June 2010 to oppose all cunning and deceit by posting the conclusion on the labyrinthofegypt.com website. And on it, he posted the paper, the Matterhorn expedition paper, which I've shown you the results from. You can still find this paper if you go and look hard enough.
Trash,
I think I have
garbage,
it on my website now too.
everywhere.
But it is something you can find if you go and look for it. And in the paper, this is what they said. Since the release of the scan results at the Ghent University public lecture, Dr. Zahi Hawass requested to stop communicating our results, intimidating the Matterhorn expedition team members with Egyptian national security sanctions, saying that it's a national security threat, basically, and that we're going to come and arrest you. Certainly if you ever come back to Egypt, but we might even just try and get you anywhere in the world if you decide to talk about this stuff. So he's basically invoking national security and says that you can't talk about what you found at Hawara. You got to ask why, right? You got to why would you do this? What is the point here? Is this a case of, hiding the truth because it's like potentially going to be out of your hands or something like that, or is it something else? Is there some other political reason? Well, I think there's a bit of both involved in this, and we have to explore that. We have to understand a little bit about the actual geological situation at Hawara and what's going on. The water table in Egypt is rising.
Here's where he talks about the water table.
On a lot of these ancient sites, it's most notably rising. And this, this is a footage from down below the Giza Plateau in the Osiris Shaft, which is a huge just series of different chambers cut into the bedrock below the causeway of the Middle Pyramid complex. Goes down about 150 feet, and at the bottom there's a big chamber that you can climb down a ladder. You stand on, get a foot on a little bit of mud and then 1 foot on the rung of the ladder, and you can lean down and I can take a little bit of footage. You can see the water in this room, right? It's actually quite a deep room, and there are passages leading off from here, but this water table obviously wasn't like this when this room was built. It probably wasn't like this when people were exploring it 50, 60 years ago even. In fact, stand by for my next video, because my next video is going to get into this and a bit more of Zahi Hawass. I think it's going to be super interesting. Just a little teaser for something I'm working on that will be coming out shortly after this video. And the reason that the water table is rising is because of something that happened in Egypt in the 1960s. It was when the high dam at Aswan was built. So there was always a low dam in Egypt. I think in the early 1900s, the British built a dam. That's the one we float around on it on the boats on our tours to Egypt. But it was the 1960s when they built the really big dam. They actually partnered with the Soviets. There's still a monument to Soviet-Egyptian freedom, or friendship, sorry, not really freedom, but friendship at the Aswan Dam, at the high dam. And when they built this, they created effectively to the south of that what is the biggest man-made lake in the world, Lake Nasser. And this had the effect essentially of getting rid of the inundation of the Nile. So the annual flooding, everybody who's familiar with this area knows that every year, typically the Nile would flood. It would deposit all of this silt and fertile material, and that's the basis for the agriculture in the Nile Valley, certainly the basis for agriculture in the Fayum. But ever since the mid-1960s, when this dam was built, this no longer happens. Now, you might be wondering, how come that makes the water table rise? It seems counterintuitive, right? You'd think that the water table would go down, but it has the opposite effect, because what you're actually doing is you're removing the 9-month dry season. So yes, you have a 3-month sort of wet season where it floods a bit, but then you have 9 months of the year where there's less water in the Nile than there is there is today.
You add 9 months.
So essentially,
of dry
with this
season.
dam, they control the flow of water in the Nile going north, and the result is you end up with more water in the Nile. It's distributed through these canals and everything else, and the ultimate effect of that is that the water table has been steadily rising. The Vase Scan project, for example, all this area in North Sudan, southern Egypt, where Lake Nasser is today. I mean, that a lot of these sites got flooded. They had to lift up Abu Simbel, Toshka, these vase sites, all of these things that we were looking at recently at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I mean, these sites don't exist anymore because they were flooded in the 60s because of this dam. So this presents quite a problem for Egypt from a political perspective, because we're talking about the great lost labyrinth of Egypt, something that's described as exceeding in grandeur all of the wonders.
Yeah, so they built the dam to control the water of the Nile better, to facilitate better and more agriculture. Now that's having a negative effect on historical sites in Egypt. But you can't tear the dam down to explore and preserve the ancient sites, or you risk the entire agricultural economic model of like the entire country. Is it embarrassment or fear of criticism? No, I think that if they didn't control the archaeological sites as strictly as they did, then they could be pressured into changing or maybe even dismantling the large dam, which would completely destroy agriculture in Egypt. Which I mean is kind of a legitimate threat to national security. Egypt imports, they're the number one importer of several things. And if you destroy their agriculture, they just become an even larger net importer. And that would probably completely collapse their economy.
Ancient world, and indeed, things like the pyramids. Now, for anybody who knows about this, if the news got out that, we found the Great Lost Labyrinth, man, this literally is, it would at least be the discovery of the century, probably of the millennium. You'd want to do something about it.
Yep.
But this puts, I think, Egypt in a bit of a sticky situation, because today the labyrinth is below the water table level at Hawara, and admittedly, it seems to be pretty caustic, salty, shallow groundwater that's probably eroding and working on the stone. You saw the image of when we go into that passage in the pyramid. Mm-hmm. The stone's eroding. There's crystal growth going all over it. It's not going to be in great condition if it's left like that for, let's say, a few hundred years. It's probably going to, deteriorate quite significantly. So, in order to do something about it, you would have to really do large-scale remediation effort on this huge area at Hawara. And that's likely to cost a whole lot of money. You have to do a whole lot of experimentation and research to find out where the water's coming from. Then you've got to go to the trouble of trying to do remediation to actually remove the groundwater problem. You might have to start messing with the agriculture and the farmers' irrigation water, mm-hmm. which is never, you start messing with farmers' water and you're asking for trouble. And to be honest, Egypt is one of those countries that needs all of the agriculture they can get. They are the world's biggest net importer of wheat. They can't grow enough food to support everyone. You start messing with their agriculture, which is, a lot of that water is being supplied through this canal that cuts right through this site. It's fraught with difficulty and danger. On the other hand, if you tell everyone, hey, we found the labyrinth, but we're not going to do anything about it because it's too difficult or it's too expensive, then you're going to face a whole lot of criticism over that. Like, it's literally the wonder of the ancient, it's one of the biggest discoveries ever of something in the ancient world. What do you mean you're not going to do anything about it? So I think there was literally a rock and a hard place. You've got this really difficult, expensive problem on one hand, or if
they're hurting your back. I know, it's so bad. I have this idea, and I don't know if it would work, but if Egypt based their economy, if Egypt made a program, an international program that said, hey, come find out all of our ancient secrets. It's going to be very expensive for you to do, and our entire economy is going to be based on it. Egypt could use their ancient archaeological sites to be as rich and powerful as Middle Eastern countries use oil for. And I think there's enough archaeological interest and potential discoveries and sites in Egypt for that model to last at least a couple hundred years. At the pace that archaeology goes, I think that could be a very, very lucrative model. And then they wouldn't necessarily have to worry that they have to import everything. Their people are so shitty it ruins the pyramids for tourists. Yeah, but if you have an influx of money, so like scammers, well, so the shitty people and the scammers are a result of a necessity that people feel that they need to resort to those mechanisms to make money. So countries like Dubai, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, if you have such an influx of revenue for the country's economy that you can pay out to people almost like a universal basic income to your country's peoples, and give those people jobs, there would be no shortage of jobs to support the archaeological industry. Plus, okay, so Norway has this fund for oil. So Norway gets paid a massive amount for oil exportation every year, and they put it into this giant general fund. And when you reach a certain age in Norway, I think it's like mid-20s maybe, I don't know exactly, you get like a monthly stipend that is very similar to a universal basic income if you're a Norwegian citizen, just from the money the country gets from exporting their oil reserves. Egypt could do that, but instead of oil, it's fees collected from archaeological projects. So you have a UBC type stipend for the entire country's citizenry. You have service jobs supporting archaeological projects. I don't know. I really think they could make a killing on it, because who in what university would say, okay, Egypt is open for business. We can go there. We can get permits. We can uncover the mysteries of ancient Egypt. We can do that. Oh, this project is going to cost X amount of $1 million in fees to pay to Egypt to go do that? Nah, not that important. No university is going to say that. Absolutely no university is going to say that. Be like, oh, it's only $2 million? Great, we had budgeted $5 million. Let's do it. Come on now. Come on now.
You announce it and you say you're not going to do anything about it, you're going to face a lot of international criticism. So I think the decision was likely made that the best thing we can do is just pretend this never happened. Right? We're not going to talk about the labyrinth. We're not going to explore it. The expedition, the Manar expedition, the fact that we found it is never going to be released to the public. And that's where it stands, right? So I think that's what happened. There is an element here of also just, hiding the truth. I think when it's convenient, that's what happens. I suspect there's a lot of the just actual hiding of the truth of hidden
bones,
expeditions and things like that. Again, watch my next video because I'm going to get into some real interesting examples of that. And again, involving Zahi Hawass, because some new information's come out about the Sphinx that I think is super interesting. But I think that's what's happened here. I don't think it's anything more complicated than a
pump it out, throw a minotaur in there, and
unfortunately affected the discovery
to fight it.
What should have been,
oh my God.
one of the most amazing sites
Wouldn't
ever.
That be
However,
incredible?
This is not where the story ends, because,
dude, that would be so crazy. Could you imagine the legends that would come out of that? We found this ancient labyrinth, so we stuck a bull down there, and people, you can pay to go fight it. Genetic engineer a minotaur? Oh God, how would you do that? I've seen a couple of different depictions of a minotaur. Either it's a bipedal bull, or it's the body of a man, head of a minotaur. I don't think you could do that. You might be able to engineer a bipedal bull, though. Maybe.
Around the same time, 2008, 2009,
second one,
there was another
half human,
expedition done by a Polish university along with Cairo University, and they went out
China
and
will
did
do it. I bet you there's a couple dudes in the world that you could convince to try. Be like, hey, See that cow over there? We're trying to make a half man, half bull. Go see what you can do. Here's a magazine. Whoa,
Geological exploration at Hawara. They actually went in to try and figure out where the water was coming from. This was not an archaeological expedition. It was much more of a geological effort to try and figure out where the water's coming from in order to block or redirect its flow and just start to figure out, what do we need to do to remediate this site. So they went and
engineer
dug a
it,
whole
not
bunch
fuck
of
it.
different...
Hey, is selective fucking not genetic engineering? Is that not the same thing?
boreholes all around the site. They were digging geological test pits, which you can see here, dating different levels of strata down a few meters. They also did ground penetrating radar here, and interestingly from their report, they found many ground penetrating anomalies which were interpreted as voids being found. So they also essentially rediscovered
you don't like this
the Labyrinth.
Conversation anymore.
Although this research was
took
done
a turn
in
on you,
2008
didn't
and
it?
2009, it wasn't published anywhere until
I see. You
around
can dish it out, but you can't take
2017.
it.
Because
I got it.
also, like the Matterhorn expedition, this was also shut down by Zahi Hawass. In fact, this was shut down a little more abruptly than the Matterhorn expedition. And this is quoting, again, the expedition team members. And in their paper, you can see the URL on the slide. This is what they wrote. It says, Dr. Zahi Hawass halted the mission, briefly jailing its director, Professor Aladdin Shaheen, then dean of Cairo's archaeology faculty, who was swiftly ousted from his post. End quote. Hawass actually jailed the guy who went out there and dared to actually try and solve this problem, or to start trying to solve this problem. And ever since then, Hawara's kind of been a dirty word in the Ministry of Antiquities in Egypt. Nobody wants to. It's like a pariah. Nobody wants to really deal with it. He put a guy in jail. He put the dean of the archaeology faculty of Cairo University in jail over trying to investigate at Hawara, which was kind of sketchy. However, they have published their results, and what did they say? What did they figure out? Well, ultimately they figured out that the water on the site is quite a difficult problem to solve. It's essentially coming from 3 different locations. It's coming from the southwest, from the north, and from the east. It's essentially shallow groundwater that's kind of pouring in through the sedimentary layers. Yep. The upland side, the west, north, and east side of the pyramid.
Because they dammed it, now the lake is seeping water into a higher level of groundwater flow. So now the groundwater level is just rising. The
water is 1 to 3 meters above that in the canal, so it's kind of more water coming in from the northern side. On the south side, the water table level's only about 0.5 to 2 meters above the water of level in the canal. You might be wondering, how is it that the groundwater's at a higher level than the level that's in the canal? Well, the layers of rock and soil and sediment here essentially wick the water up. So it's if you put like paper in a glass, it's going to wick and suck that water up. Same thing's kind of happening here. And they determined this with the use of all these boreholes that you can see, as well as the test pits that they dug. They suspect that if there is deeper levels of water, it might be coming from a separate aquifer somewhere on the site, but that ultimately more excavations are needed. They need to do more investigation here to truly determine the source and the direction of the water in order to start remediating it. As far as I know, that is the end of any of the on-site research at Hawara. It was essentially all stopped by Hawass, and just like he jailed a dude, he shut down the Matterhorn expedition, he put it all to bed, and that was really until the more modern, I guess, space-based technology started to come in. And the first account of this that I heard about was something that was done by Dr. Carmen Bulter and Klaus Donner. Now, both Dr. Carmen Bulter, rest in peace, she passed away a few years ago, and Klaus Donner, I guess you could consider them kind of alternative independent researchers and authors in their field. Carmen Bulter made a pretty good documentary series called The Pyramid Code. It actually features the work of Hakim El Ayawan, who is the father of my good friend Yusuf Ayawan. Her whole show, I think, is based on his teachings of the indigenous Sufi legends and everything. And she's been, essentially a warrior for the Labyrinth for a long time. And then she had heard from Klaus Donner, who's an Austrian, who said that, he has a friend in Germany who happens to own or is part of a company, a startup company that can look into the Earth from 6 kilometers down. Like it's essentially using satellites to peer into the Earth and be able to find voids and minerals and materials.
That's crazy that we have technology that can do that. That's absolutely wild. God damn. Here, let me share this video link again. There you go. Go check out this video. Go check out the channel Uncharted X with Ben here. I forget his last name again. I think that is gonna do it for me tonight. I kind of wanted to play some Hell Is Us, but just didn't get to it. That's okay. I think I will stream tomorrow though. We'll do some Hell Is Us. I think that's pretty good. I caught Icky out the corner of my eye, and he looked kind of weird. He might be a skinwalker. Are you a skinwalker? No? Yes? Blink twice if you're a skinwalker. Oh, he just looked away. Okay, not a skinwalker. Cool. You really like the format for this stream? I can do this more often? Hell yeah. Yeah, maybe we will. This kind of format is what I kind of intend for like random Sunday streams to be. Those are few and far between because Sunday is like my designated day off to get stuff that I'm not able to get done during the week and then like be able to go to bed early so I can go to work Monday morning. But we'll see. We will see. Okay. We'll try to do some Hell Is Us tomorrow. Thanks for being here tonight. Remember, !Prime. We're going to get the violence off of Twitch one way or another. Thanks. Give me a Prime sub. If you don't give it to me, give it to somebody else. Me stream tomorrow? Yeah, I'm going to try to. We'll do some Hell Is Us. Okay. Yep. #fuck Hassan. Thanks for being here. Have a good night. Take care. Goodbye.